I'm quite happy to have you close. I just find myself pondering this distinction between the difference between information as an abstraction and information as something palpable. That itself is a difference, and it's almost like if you have a Turing machine and the tape has got no holes punched in it. It's like, okay, you've got a machine that's capable of manipulating difference, but you have no difference
You have to make the
to
difference.
plug in.
You have to make it concrete at some point.
Somehow, you've got to
Somehow
have
to
real
do it.
difference.
It's the story of hanging chads, right? I mean,
Yeah.
You have to punch the hole.
You have
in
to punch the
car
hole,
at
and if
some
you don't
point.
do it right, you lose Florida. So,
And on the other hand, if you have a world of real difference, but you have no machine that's capable of somehow comprehending and manipulating, what's that? That's the world of noise.
well, except we can manage the world of difference mechanically, always have, right? So we harvest wheat, we're always dealing with the world of difference and clustering things that are alike and treating them en masse because they're alike. The crucial thing that we'd be lacking are computers, which would be a very, very bad thing. The ability to manage them abstractly is the world of the computer.
Unless you think that somehow by managing the wheat, we are doing something computationally that is then, in a sense, replicated by the
So
computer.
this is the question that my contention that the canon of the history of information is wrong. This is the very question that needs to be addressed at that. It's what I'm contending is that reading information back into the threshing of wheat, you can do it, and maybe there's some utility there, but that's not an informational activity. It can't be because information didn't exist until 1948. Before 1948, information was something you didn't know or was stuff in a table calculations.
Well, that seems kind of weird. You mean it wasn't there? It wasn't just that we hadn't articulated the concept. It's like the whole thing wasn't there.
Yeah,
Those might be
there was
more
no
equivalent.
abstract concept of measurement independent of the thing being measured.
not in the information sense. Part of my contention overall, and I'm not confident of this, is that bits are something that we do. That bits emerge because we're interested in modeling the economy, and so we pay attention to that. And the next moment, we're interested in modeling clothing, and so we bitify the clothing. But there's an infinite number of ways we can turn the world into bits. There's a lot of stuff, and there's an indefinite number of attributes we can consider. All of those can be turned into bits, but we don't do it unless we have some reason to do it. Before we had the notion of bits, before we had the systems of machines that enabled us to use bits, we had no reason to do it. And so we didn't. We just didn't turn things into bits.
So when we were doing Morse code, would you describe that as pre-information in Shannon's terms?
Yes, I would.
Mm.
So this is one of the hard things. So there's a history of punch
Even though
cards.
it goes through wires and it's a message and we encode it and we send it and we hit noise and we decode it and then the other end, it's the telegraph.
Yes, there are many instances in our history where we use that pattern. Spies have used it since biblical times.
Yeah.
But the strong version of my contention, and I'm not sure what actually rests upon my maintaining the strong version is, you can read it now, it looks that way to us, but then it didn't. It wasn't yet bits. It was transforming one word into another that was unlike it and unguessable. But that wasn't a bit-based activity. I'll give you a different example. DNA now looks to us absolutely like information. In fact, if you stand up in a public place and say DNA is not information, people think that you are like denouncing evolution, that you hate science. But I think it's perfectly reasonable to say that DNA is not information. However, information theory works spectacularly in helping us to understand it, but it's not information. And before Shannon, before information theory, we had a notion, we talked about molecules like DNA, because we didn't understand DNA yet. Shannon was 48, in terms of lock and key, of templates. We did a couple of jigsaw puzzles. We had a few ways of talking about how one molecule would cause another one to form, or why a bacterium would attach or not. It was very physical. It was lock and key. And that continues to be a way that we talk about DNA at times. The information one is a very useful one, but I certainly wouldn't deny it. But it's a way of talking about it, just as at times biologists talk about templates and locks and keys. That the antibody fits in and does the.
It seems like it's very tied to sort of metaphor and analogy. I mean, it does seem very tied to language practices. So in some ways,
You were such a Wittgensteinian.
Nothing
wrong with that.
It's a total accident because I read them and I didn't get the foggiest idea what the hell was going on. But apparently I soaked it up
But it's such a matter of language practice.
It seems a lot. I mean, and also with the telegraph. And I guess I think I keep seeing it in my head going back to this basic question of if you think you can have ideas that are faithful to the world that you're using them to describe, then you can you can translate that into information as Shannon does in a certain way. But then another interesting question that seems to come out of this too, which goes off in a slightly different direction, is when you start modeling the whole world as information, do you begin to mold the world into information?
It's exactly.
It seems
well put. Yes, and that is. So
is that chapter 2? No, sorry.
That's why this matters, right? And what I have not been successful at is understanding how the informational view molds the world itself.
Oh, I got more books to talk
but yeah, well, me
about.
too.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
There's a clear path through the military, through the history of the military,
yeah.
and that's the closed world.
Economics is good too.
Economics is a fantastic example,
Great.
where we took entire systems and businesses and systems, and we thought about them almost exclusively in terms of models. And if we got the model right, then we could manage the system. Get the model wrong, and we fall off the end of the earth. There are bunches of good examples, and that's what that's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm interested in. And that's ultimately why, if this matters, if the ideas of the paper matter, that's why they matter.